Hi everybody, I'm Heather from North Central Regional Library, and today we have Esker with us again, and we are going to talk about mushrooms. So my first question, Esker, is what is a mushroom and what is a fungus?
Okay, so hi Heather. So we're talking about the study of fungi or mycology. And fungus, when we look at classification systems, we have 7 levels of classification, the first being kingdoms. And so there is a fungal kingdom. Compared to the plant kingdom, the fungus is not a plant. Plants photosynthesize and obtain their carbohydrates or nutrition from the sun, or partly from the sun, and that the fungi do not do this. The fungi produce enzymes, and the enzymes break down elements in the environment, and then thereby get their nutrition that way. And so they're more like animals as a result of that. And so fungi are not plants, but more like animals. Part of the life cycle of the fungus is the reproductive phase, and that is called the mushroom of the fungi that we see out in the forested areas. That is the mushrooms that we see. That's a certain type of fungus, but that's the reproductive phase of the fungus. And so I have a picture here that shows the life cycle of the fungus. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, and this is for the morel. And so this is usually what we're seeing above the ground, and that's the reproductive phase, and it will form a mushroom or a fungal seed, and that spore, called a spore, and the spore germinates when conditions are favorable, and it forms hyphae, and the hyphae will combine to form mycelia or mycelial mass. And that mass, in this case, can form a sclerotium to overwinter or provide protection during more stress times for the morel fungus. But eventually it gets back into the reproductive phase, and then the cycle begins again. And so this is what mycelial mats look like. And so I have my mycelial mat here to demonstrate some things later. But there are benefits associated with fungi, and the mycelial mats in the soil will break down products like we talked about, and that provides nutrition for plants. The mushroom can provide nutrition for other mammals, insects, bacteria, parasitic fungi, and things like that.
Well, thank you. So what do mushrooms need to survive, and can you compare it to what we need to survive?
Yeah, so oftentimes we talk about basic needs for survival. For humans, we consider food, water, shelter, space, some basic needs. And the fungi, you can say fungi or fungi, the fungi also have those same needs. And so when we see our mushroom out in the forest, we want to think about where it's growing, what sort of environment it lives in. And one of the things you can do when you see your mushroom is think about what terrain it's growing in, what physical features of the environment it grows in. It may be wetlands, it may be more of a rocky soil, a burned forest. If it's a mountainous area, is it on the south slope or the north slope? But this provides you more information about your fungus. In addition, look at the trees that are nearby. Oftentimes, these fungi are associated with certain trees. In this area, the morel, for example, is associated with cottonwoods. And so you can look for cottonwoods out in the forest, and you might find morels in that area. And so in addition to that, look at what the fungus is growing on. This provides information regarding what food sources or what strategies it uses to obtain its food. And so that's an important aspect of where you're going to find your fungus. And remember all of these, I'm going to go into strategies, but all of these strategies are more of a continuum that the fungus itself may go between different strategies to obtain its food. So one of the strategies is called saprophytic feeding. And so fungi are saprophytes if they eat off of dead tissue or obtain their nutrition from dead tissue. And these are considered the decomposers, and they create that topsoil that we're walking on. And the second is a parasitic type fungus, and that lives off of live tissue. It gets its nutrition from live tissue, for example, in the plant. The plant may die, and the fungus may transition to a saprophyte and live off the dead tissue. And then the third relationships may be a mutualistic. That's where both, for example, plant and fungus benefit. And one of the more common types of mutualistic relationships is a mycorrhizal relationship between the fungus, the mycorrhizal fungus, and the plant. And this is of interest because many of the fungi that we see and that we are able to eat, such as morels or chanterelles, that they are considered mycorrhizal fungi. And so this type of fungus provides the plant with nutrition as it reaches out into the soil with its mycelium. And the plant provides the fungus with the carbohydrates as it photosynthesizes. And so it's considered mutualistic, and it's a mycorrhizal type relationship. So I have a demonstration. If this were a root, and if this was a mineral or a nutrient, or if these were, you can see that the root system of the plant would be growing into the soil and have available these different nutrient sources. But imagine if mycelial masses extended out from the root, and you can see how much more or how much access it has to the environment that it's living in, and more access to its nutrient sources than if it doesn't have that relationship. And so most plants have a relationship with fungi, and the mycelial mats will provide that plant with nutrition and water sources, make them more available. And the plant grows stronger, and it does assist oftentimes in plants growing in an area versus not growing in that area. So very important relationship.
Cool. Thank you. That was a really cool demonstration.
Yeah.
So I was wondering about foraging for mushrooms. How do you forage for them? Where do you forage for them? How do you know which ones to eat and not to eat? So many questions.
I know. And so always first have someone who knows how to identify the fungus that you're foraging. And so as you're going out into the forest area, there are seasons where you will find different kinds of fungi that are edible fungi. This particular, I have you can't read all of it, but this is from chefs-resources.com. And you can find these online. You can find them in different books and resources in that area. But you have the edible fungus that grows in the state of Washington. And then you have the months across of the year. And so, for example, with morels on this particular table, they're available from April through August. In this area, it is more from May, June in that area. So, but these are great resources when you think about when you want to go or when you're able to, and then what kinds of mushrooms that might be available. And there are books to identify the mushrooms, and they talk about this also. I know you had some books that you were familiar with.
This one I've been taking out. It's called Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. And normally you can check it out at the library. This is actually a library book. I guess I kind of monopolized it during COVID, but I've been using this for morel hunting, and then I also have this a field guide to edible mushrooms. And it's just a very small guide that you can put in your backpack or a small day hiking bag.
Nice.
And it has some of the edible mushrooms you can eat, including morels. And so that's been a fun project that I've been doing this summer is morel hunting. So I was wondering if you could just give a little blurb to why in our area is it only June or May and June for morels rather than all the way through August.
This area, and I'm probably a little drier in the north central in the rain shadow here, but this area tends to be drier. For any mushroom to form that reproductive structure, it needs a very hospitable environment. And so temperature, rainfall, soil temperature, as well as ambient temperature. So all of these things combine to make it favorable for a mushroom to form its reproductive phase, the fungus to form its reproductive phase, the mushroom. And so it really depends on the many different variables, and those are just a few. And so this area is a little drier. For areas that are a little warmer, it'll be a shorter season. West of the Cascades, you might find a more extended season because of the moisture, and it may be a little cooler. So there are all sorts of variables, though, that get involved when you're talking about when you can find them. And so it's important to know your area as well as what the general range is, so you can determine when to hunt, a specific mushroom, I think.
Okay. So I was wondering, what about the etiquette for hunting mushrooms? Is there rules for certain mushrooms to pick? Can you go and pick all of the mushrooms in a field? And then do you need permits or anything? If an individual has their mushroom book, they know what they're looking for, can they just go out and pick some mushrooms? Do they have to worry about getting permits or getting a fine if they don't have one?
Yeah, so mushroom etiquette. When you're going out to look for mushrooms, and it varies on the resource that you're reading. It can be anywhere that you're picking 1/4 to 2/3 of the mushrooms that you find. So if you find 10 mushrooms, for example, you're picking maybe 3 to 6 of those 10 mushrooms. So that's really important, not to pick them all. And you want to cut them above the surface. And so you're getting your mushroom, you're not picking them all because you want other people to be able to find them. You want them to also grow in that area more and be allowed to grow. And then also other animals will be eating these mushrooms. And so they're nutrition sources or resources for animals in the forest. So you want to be careful of that. Another etiquette is to pack it in and pack it out so that there's not trash in the area, and so that and the other is not to stamp, not to disturb the area too much where you're finding your mushrooms, so that again they can grow. Permits. You can contact the U.S. Forest Service. They have information online, and you can also call the district offices. Permits. If you're picking in this area 5 gallons or less, you do not need a permit. Anyone can forage mushrooms anywhere in the Forest Service, though they manage that area. And so for that area, it's recommended that 5 gallons or less for personal use be picked, which for the morel, for example, would be about 11 pounds. So it's a lot of mushrooms still. And that a permit is required, though, for professional use or commercial use, and also if you're picking more than 5 gallons. And they can issue those. This season in this area, they were not issuing the permits for commercial use, but usually those are issued. When you're going for personal use, though, they want you to carry this. And this talks about the etiquette of mushroom picking. And this is, again, specific to morels. But it gives them, if you're ever asked, it gives them an idea that you've reviewed some of this information. And so they do ask that people carry that with them. Yeah.
Cool. If I could get that link, then I can put that when I post the video so people can go on and look
Okay.
at that guide.
Okay.
So if you are going out to collect mushrooms, though, what are the basic things that you need to bring with you?
So, for your own safety, always have water, some food. Make sure you have a good pair of boots and know your terrain if you can. Burned areas are very different than walking in an open field. You have to be very careful of holes that may have formed, for example, from tree stubs and things like that in a burned area. But yeah, so those are you could have your equipment. Look at your equipment. You may want a map. Well, it's nice to have a map, definitely, and compass. Also, when you're collecting mushrooms, you like to collect them in things that allow them to aerate. So a brown bag, a basket, something like that, so they don't get really mushy. Because mushrooms are composed of 90% water. So you want to maintain some sort of aeration so they don't exude and get really mushy, or exude that water and get really mushy. Um, and Yeah, so bring a knife so you can cut the mushroom above the soil surface and not just pull it out, because when you're pulling it, you may be pulling some of the mycelium out, and you want to leave that if you can.
Okay, thanks. All right, so now I kind of wanted to ask if there were any really good morel recipes. So if somebody's going out, they find a bunch of morels, they take them home. What do they do with them? How do they prepare them? Get all the dirt and insects off them, and then
Oh
cook them.
yeah. Um, the fresh morel, they're usually there are a couple ways. I haven't had too many problems with insects. But yeah, you can soak them. You can put them in water for a little bit and then dry them out. The easiest thing you can do with any mushroom that edible mushroom that you forage is to make saute it in oil and or butter. Some people just like to use butter. I like to use a little oil and then add the butter at the end. You add your herb, and you add your, if you want to, you can add a liquid such as broth, the cream, wine. Some people will do that. And you have that boil down, and it just is very, very good. And you can also add them to dishes such as eggs, poultry dishes, that sort, vegetable dishes, pasta dishes. So there are all sorts of things you can do with the mushrooms and the edible mushrooms. Yeah.
Good. Do you have any other fun facts about mushrooms? I found mushroom leather one time, and I was really interested in that. So if you could speak to that at all, or any other random mushroom facts.
Yeah. Yeah. So for anyone exploring mushrooms and fungi in general, you're going to find so many good stories, really, about the lives of these fungi. They're just incredible, and so I think that's always worth reading and exploring, investigating. Fungi, there's one story as far as fun facts that fungi can live in a vacuum. And they've also been shown to live in areas even after, like the volcanic explosion at Mount St. Helens. They were found 15 inches below the surface, the spores. So, or the sclerotia, I'm sorry, was found 15 inches below the soil of Mount St. Helens. I'm not sure the time period, but yeah, so the survival mechanisms of these fungi are just incredible. You were talking about the mushroom leather. It's called muskin. And I have a picture of one of the fungi that they use. This is black and white, but it's called Fomus fomentarius. And it's a bracket fungi or a polyspore. And this is what the leather looks like.
Is that growing on a tree, that mushroom?
Yeah, so this is the tree. And then there's the bracket fungi or polyspore growing on the tree. And these can get very, very large. And they have produced this leather. And I was able to find some pictures of some of the products. I don't
Wow.
know if yeah. So these are shoes. You can see that. And then watch bands. But they also make lampshades and purses and anything that really leather can be made into. But this is called muskin. It's a mushroom leather. So really, really nice to see that. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last question I have for you is, are there any crafts that we can do with mushrooms?
Yeah. So I sort of renamed that today into activities
Okay.
because I wanted to include this other one. So one of the things as we go exploring our environment that I recommend is to keep a journal. And in that journal, you can draw pictures, and in this case, draw pictures of the mushrooms. And I think it really helps provide you with an understanding of the mushroom, but also of the area. So you can write down the terrain and what we talked about, the types of trees in the area, what they're growing on, and maybe even go back to that area and explore it the next year. This is one example of really beautiful illustrations that were in someone's journal. And you can see that they grew the mushroom, or they drew the mushroom through here. This is more of a microscopic view. And then this is called the spore print. And these are the other thing I wanted to talk about is the spore print can be used to identify the mushroom. But they're absolutely beautiful. And so in order to make a spore print, you take usually a cap type mushroom, right, and the stem and the cap, and then you cut it off right at the stem cap where they meet. And you take that cap and you put it onto a surface, and it can be a white surface, black, aluminum foil, glass, and then you leave it there. Some people will put a drop of water on there to help the spores release. Some people cover them with containers like a plastic container or a glass container, but you don't really need to. And then you leave it on there for 2 to 24 hours. I'm going to show you one that I left on for 48 hours. And so it varies on the species, again, the humidity in the air and that sort. This is one here. So this was a bolete, and you can see that it's really dry at this point. And I had put it on a piece of paper like this. And so I just laid it without any covering or anything in the room. And it came out, this was the spore print. So I don't know if you see that. And so that's the spore print of that
Very
particular
cool.
mushroom.
It's like a fingerprint.
Yeah. And these spores were brown. Spores can come in all colors and they in shapes. If you look under the microscope, you can see their shape. But they can be purple and orange and yellow. And again, that helps identify the fungus that you're looking at. But this is what the spore print may look like initially. And so you can see that sort of wet surface there. This was a white on white, so it was harder to see. This is a spore print that's blown up, so you can see the really
Wow.
beautiful. Isn't it gorgeous, that pattern?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Do you
and
know
then
what kind of
these
mushroom that is?
are, no, I don't. This was just
Okay.
the generic. And then this has a bolete, and then it has other guild type mushrooms, so you can see all the different spore type prints.
Oh,
So
really? That's really cool.
yeah, and it's a fun activity. So when you go back to your journal, again, that you could draw these pictures in there, yeah, and just keep sort of observing, which is really, really a good thing to do as you go out into our world, and then keep track of it. Yeah. So. Mhm.
That's very cool. That was
Yeah.
awesome facts. Do you have anything else that you want to add before we go?
Yeah. So one of the things I just wanted to sort of quote or read this. This is sort of taken from different books and different resources. But I just wanted to read this because I thought it was really cool. So this says, all sorts of mushrooms are out and about in spring, summer, and fall, and some in the winter, again, depending on where you are. So when you're out there, look down and look around. Not all are edible. So always make sure you have someone, again, available that knows how to identify these if you're picking for edible mushrooms. Although, all mushrooms are beautiful and they're unique. And so I want you to think about the life cycles, the ecology, their ecosystem. Think about how integral and important they are to us and to our world and for our present world. So mushrooms are very important to the life of the planet.
Definitely. Cool.
Or I should say fungi are very important to the life of the planet.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Esker.
Yeah, thank you.